White pilot calls, cops on black teen, speechless, when his mom arrives, and she's the airline owner. Welcome to today's gripping story, a tale of confrontation, hidden identities, and startling revelations. Set in the high-stakes world of commercial aviation, our narrative begins with a single, seemingly small misunderstanding at the bustling Denver International Airport. In a matter of minutes, tensions flare and assumptions ignite, pitting a determined teenager against an authoritative pilot who holds shocking prejudice in his heart. But when the teenager's mother arrives, the entire dynamic shifts in ways no one could predict. From suspicious glances to jaw-dropping discoveries, this story takes you on a roller coaster ride through power struggles, loyalty, and the surprising twists fate can deliver. The stage is set for drama as reputations, careers, and personal lives hang in the balance. Unlikely heroes emerge, long-buried secrets unravel, and cunning villains expose themselves. Fasten your seatbelts because nothing is as it seems, and each turn reveals deeper truths until justice finally lands in the most astonishing way possible. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Beneath the vast steel arches of Denver International Airport, young Dominic Spencer stood in Terminal A, squinting at his smartphone and occasionally glancing up at the massive departure board. He was all of 17, tall and slender, sporting a faded Los Angeles Lakers cap. This was the day he'd been looking forward to. He was about to fly by himself for the first time, heading to Chicago O'Hare for a summer internship program at a prestigious tech firm. Despite the daunting swirl of travelers, Dominic exuded the eager confidence of someone who believed in infinite possibilities. The terminal hummed with life. Business travelers rushing past in suits, families lugging strollers and suitcases, and staff navigating the labyrinth of gates. Nearby, a Starbucks line wrapped around a pillar, tempting passengers with the promise of espresso and comfort. Dominic had arrived early, having double-checked the e-ticket on his phone. He needed to drop off his carry-on at gate A24, but was momentarily distracted by 2 TSA agents hurrying toward a security checkpoint with anxious expressions. Across the hall, Captain Ray Whitaker, a white pilot in his early 50s, marched with a distinct air of self-importance. He wore the standard airline uniform, dark slacks, crisp white shirt, and an epaulette-laden jacket embroidered with gold stripes on the shoulders. The embroidered wings over his heart declared his rank, Senior Captain for Skyway Horizons, a smaller but fast-growing U.S. airline. Whitaker was in no particular rush. His flight was still an hour from boarding. Instead, he allowed himself a slow, scrutinizing survey of the crowds moving about the terminal. What caught Whitaker's eye almost immediately was Dominic. The pilot's gaze narrowed. At first, it was unclear what drew his attention so sharply. Dominic was doing nothing remarkable, simply checking his phone, ruffling through some papers, occasionally placing a call. Perhaps it was the baseball cap and the teen's relaxed posture that piqued the pilot's suspicion. Or maybe, somewhere deep in Whitaker's psyche, an implicit bias was at work. Before he realized it, he found himself walking closer to where Dominic stood. Dominic, unaware he was being watched, tucked his phone into his pocket and carefully folded the letter confirming his summer internship at Tesla's Chicago offices. He still couldn't believe it. He'd beaten out hundreds of other applicants. He wanted to document every step of this trip on his social media, which included filming the plane's takeoff. His mother had teased him that he was obsessed with capturing first experiences on video, but she never outright discouraged him. She recognized his passion for storytelling and technology. Suddenly, Dominic felt a presence hovering uncomfortably close to him. Turning, he found himself face to face with Captain Whitaker's stern gaze. The pilot's expression carried a layer of disapproval, as if Dominic had committed some invisible violation. "Excuse me, son," Whitaker said with forced politeness. "Are you waiting for someone?" Dominic swallowed, his hands slipping into his pockets. "No, sir. I'm just heading to gate A24 for my flight. It boards in about 2 hours." Whitaker's eyes flicked to the teenager's phone. And what flight would that be? Taken aback by the question's directness, Dominic nevertheless answered respectfully. Flight 662 to Chicago O'Hare, sir. The pilot merely nodded, lips pursed. For a moment, there was nothing more, just an unsettling silence. Then, as if concluding a private assessment, Whitaker stepped back, replying gruffly, "All right, safe travels." With that, he strode off, leaving Dominic with a strange sensation crawling under his skin like he'd just been examined under a microscope. But he shrugged it off. People were sometimes odd, especially in an airport setting, where everyone was on edge about security. Little did Dominic know that peculiar run-in would be the spark for a chain of events he'd never forget. Captain Whitaker walked away, frowning, already pulling out his phone. He eyed Dominic one more time from a distance, as if memorizing every detail. Whitaker wasn't just a pilot, he prided himself on being an ex-Marine. Someone always ready to protect and serve in ways that transcended his job description. And in Dominic, for whatever reason, he saw a threat. The unspoken seeds of suspicion were planted, and soon they would take root, setting in motion a dramatic confrontation that would rock the entire airport. Dominic's excitement about his upcoming trip was quickly overshadowed by an uneasy feeling. He noticed, on more than one occasion, that Captain Whitaker seemed to lurk nearby, observing him. At first, Dominic tried to ignore it, focusing on updating his mother via text telling her he was fine, on schedule, and grabbing a snack before boarding. Over at Gate at 24, ground staff wearing Skyway Horizons badges were dealing with a small surge of early arrivals. As Dominic approached, he saw an elderly woman struggling with her suitcase and rushed over to help. She rewarded him with a grateful smile. But in the corner of his eye, Dominic caught a glimpse of Whitaker again, standing behind a pillar. The pilot's knuckles were white where they gripped his phone, and he seemed to be talking hurriedly. Dominic couldn't hear the words, but the expression on Whitaker's face was enough to make him feel uneasy. The moments that followed were a tense waiting game. Dominic tried to shake off the idea that he was being profiled or singled out. Yet every time he glanced over his shoulder, he noticed Whitaker in the background. Finally, boarding for Flight 662 was announced for first class, then premium, and then general economy passengers. Dominic, using the priority pass his mother had given him as a celebratory gift for landing the internship, filed into line with the premium group. As the line advanced, Dominic rifled through his pocket to pull out his phone and electronic boarding pass. To his shock, he couldn't find his ID. Panic bubbled in his chest. He distinctly remembered stowing it in his backpack. He quickly stepped out of line, rummaging through every pocket of his small carry-on. No ID. Heart pounding, Dominic realized he might have lost it somewhere between the terminal entrance and this gate. A flash of alarm had him wondering, could it have slipped out during that strange encounter with Whitaker? Or maybe at the Starbucks stand? He took a deep breath and reminded himself that panicking would solve nothing. Pulling up the TSA website on his phone, he confirmed that there might be some workaround. Sometimes an alternate ID could be used, or, in certain cases, additional screening. Just as he was about to head back toward the security checkpoint, a voice interrupted. Looking for this? It was a gruff, familiar tone. Dominic spun around to see Captain Whitaker holding Dominic's Colorado State ID card between two fingers, like an evidence bag. Relief flooded him briefly, but the look on the pilot's face was anything but friendly. Where did you find it? Dominic asked, extending his hand. Whitaker hesitated, gaze darting around as if suspicious of onlookers. Found it on the floor back by the main concourse. You should be more careful. Dominic exhaled. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. He reached for the ID. To his astonishment, Whitaker didn't hand it over. Instead, he turned it in his own hand, studying it. Dominic Spencer, age 17. His gaze lifted to Dominic's face. A bit young to be traveling alone, aren't you? Dominic frowned, confused by the intrusion. I have an internship in Chicago. It's all legitimate. Can I please have my ID back? The pilot's grip remained firm. Not so fast, son. Are you certain you're supposed to be on this flight? Annoyance flashed in Dominic's eyes. He cleared his throat, trying to keep calm. Yes, sir. I have a valid ticket. Glancing around nervously, Dominic added, Is there a problem? Whitaker narrowed his eyes, stepping closer. A chill emanated from him. The pilot spoke softly, but each word dripped with an accusatory undertone. I don't know yet. Could be. Those words echoed ominously in Dominic's mind. He opened his mouth to protest, but footsteps approached from behind. Officer Thomas Jenkins, an airport police officer, stood with one hand on his radio. He'd been alerted to suspicious activity by an unidentified phone call unbeknownst to Dominic. That call had come from none other than Whitaker. Immediately, Jenkins addressed them both. "Gentlemen, what's going on here?" he asked, scanning their faces. His expression remained neutral, but held the no-nonsense edge of an officer used to dealing with airport tensions. Whitaker moved quickly, explaining in a quiet, confident voice, "I'm Captain Ray Whitaker of Skyway Horizons. I witnessed this young man acting suspiciously around the terminal, possibly tampering with some passenger belongings." He gave Dominic a sharp look. "I found his ID on the floor. Now, I'm not accusing him of anything just yet, but I thought it was better to call airport security for verification." Dominic's jaw nearly dropped. "Tampering? I haven't touched anyone's bag except for helping an elderly woman move hers. I'm just here to catch my flight to Chicago." Officer Jenkins's eyebrows lifted, flicking his attention between the uniformed pilot and the anxious teen. "All right," he said, calm but firm. "I need some clarity." Turning to Dominic, he continued, "Show me your boarding pass, son. If you have a phone or an email, show me." Dominic wrestled with his phone, opening the airline app, and displayed the digital boarding pass. Jenkins took a look at the details: name, flight number, seat assignment. All of it seemed in order. Whitaker attempted a mild sneer. "He's traveling alone. That's unusual for a teenager, don't you think?" The officer shrugged. "Not necessarily. Many minors fly unaccompanied, especially at that age." Jenkins paused, eyeing the pilot. "Captain, do you have concrete evidence of wrongdoing? Or is this a misunderstanding?" Dominic could see Whitaker's cheeks reddening ever so slightly. The pilot finally extended the ID, and Dominic took it back, grateful to have his identification once more. "I just wanted to make sure everything was legal," Whitaker said, an undercurrent of defensiveness creeping into his tone. "Airports are high-risk environments." "Yes, they are," Jenkins replied, crossing his arms. "But so far, I see no cause for alarm. If Mr. Spencer is a valid ticket holder with the correct ID, there's no reason to detain him." At that, Dominic exhaled a sigh of relief. He clutched his ID like a lifeline. "Thank you," he managed, voice shaking with frustration. He looked at Whitaker, wanting to say more, but a swirl of passengers around them and the intimidation factor of the uniform kept him silent. Officer Jenkins gave a curt nod. "Thank you for your vigilance, Captain Whitaker. But it looks like this is resolved. Dominic, have a safe flight." The pilot appeared unsatisfied, but he stepped back. "He's on my flight, I believe," Whitaker stated, pointing to the gate sign for flight 662. "I'll keep an eye on him." It was a menacing promise, not a friendly reassurance. Dominic turned and walked toward the gate, ID and phone in hand, heart thumping hard. The officer moved off, radioing the all clear. Captain Whitaker lingered, eyes boring into Dominic's retreating figure. The tension in the air was palpable, as though the pilot was convinced Dominic was trouble and was determined to prove it. What none of them realized was that the faint rumbling of trouble was about to explode into full-blown chaos. A single phone call had been made, more would follow, suspicion had been sown, and Captain Whitaker was about to cultivate it into something far more dangerous, something that would affect not only Dominic's future, but the reputations of everyone involved. By the time Dominic boarded the plane, his mood had soured. He settled into his premium economy seat on the Boeing 737 next to a window overlooking a row of gates. He flicked through social media posts on his iPhone, trying to distract himself, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something else was about to go wrong. Flight 662 had a decent passenger load, business types, families, and a handful of teenagers traveling with sports teams. Flight attendants bustled about, assisting with overhead bins. Dominic caught snatches of conversation, a mother comforting a crying toddler, a man complaining about the overhead space, the gentle hiss of the air conditioning. Several rows ahead, Dominic noticed Captain Whitaker step into the cabin momentarily, scanning the faces of passengers. Their eyes locked. Whitaker offered no friendly nod, only a disdainful glare before turning to speak with a flight attendant. Dominic closed his eyes, leaning back against the headrest, wishing he could just teleport to Chicago. Just then, a friendly voice interrupted his thoughts. First time in premium economy? The question came from a woman in her mid-20s seated in the aisle seat. She had curly hair and wore a bright green t-shirt that read University of Colorado Boulder. Her ID badge revealed that she was a campus ambassador. Yeah, Dominic admitted, smiling weakly. My mom surprised me with the upgrade. The woman introduced herself as Naomi Parks. She, too, was traveling for business, some sort of academic conference in Chicago. Her warm, disarming manner soothed Dominic's nerves. He told her briefly about his internship, leaving out the strange incident with Captain Whitaker. Shortly after, the flight attendants performed the safety demonstration. Dominic tried to follow along, but the tension in his shoulders wouldn't ease. Then came the standard announcements, culminating in the pilot's introduction over the PA system. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Ray Whitaker, and I'll be flying you from Denver to Chicago today. Flight time is approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. The weather is clear, and we expect a smooth ride. Dominic felt a pang of worry. So Whitaker was indeed the captain for this flight. He had the power to make Dominic's life difficult if he chose. But there was no reason to suspect that the pilot would pursue his bizarre vendetta any further, right? The plane taxied, accelerating down the runway. Dominic clutched the armrests, excitement and anxiety mingling as the aircraft lifted into the sky. Denver's vast plains shrank below. For a moment, Dominic tried to focus on the majestic view, the sprawling cityscape, the distant Rocky Mountains. Flying always reminded him of endless possibility, but that fleeting comfort faded as soon as he imagined Captain Whitaker in the cockpit, possibly stewing over imaginary crimes. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign switched off. Passengers relaxed, some ordering drinks or snacks. Naomi struck up a conversation, asking Dominic about his interests in technology. She was impressed by his internship and even suggested potential scholarships he could apply for. Their conversation was an island of normalcy, yet Dominic's senses remained on alert like stepping on shards of glass. Mid-flight, about an hour in, a tremor of turbulence interrupted the calm. The seatbelt sign pinged back on, and a flight attendant's voice instructing everyone to remain seated crackled through the cabin. Dominic glimpsed a flight attendant rushing to the forward galley, concern etched on her face. The plane gave another shudder, stronger this time, sending a ripple of alarm through the cabin. Overhead bins rattled. Someone yelped in the back. Then everything stabilized. Dominic breathed, trying to calm his pounding heart. That was normal turbulence, he told himself. It happens. The pilot's voice came over the PA. We're encountering a small weather system. Please remain seated for your safety. We'll navigate around it to ensure a smoother ride. But even as the plane leveled out, Dominic noticed the flight attendants wore guarded expressions. Something else was going on, something more than just typical turbulence. A faint beep from the forward cabin indicated calls between the cockpit and crew. Before Dominic could speculate further, the seatbelt sign clicked off. The flight attendants resumed service, albeit with visible tension in their eyes. 10 minutes later, Naomi pointed out a commotion near the back of the cabin. An older passenger was arguing with a flight attendant. Dominic caught snippets. I need my medication from the overhead bin. And I'm sorry, ma'am, but the captain wants everyone seated at the moment. The woman continued to protest, her voice rising in alarm. Eventually, another flight attendant stepped in, calming her down and retrieving the medication. The incident was small but emblematic of the heightened nerves on board. Another wave of turbulence hit. A flight attendant from the front quickly walked down the aisle and stopped at Dominic's row. Looking at him, she spoke in a hushed tone. Sir, the captain would like to see you in the cockpit. Dominic's heart dropped. Naomi stared at him, confused. Other passengers craned their necks. Why on earth would the captain summon him? Of all people. Me? Why? Dominic managed, blinking in shock. The flight attendant shrugged, carefully neutral. He just requested your presence. It's quite unusual, but maybe he has questions about something. If you'd prefer, you can say no. Dominic hesitated. Every sense in his body screamed that this was not a good idea. but refusing might make him look guilty of what he didn't know, but he already felt under a microscope. So, with trembling hands, he unbuckled his seatbelt. Naomi offered him a supportive, concerned look. Standing up in the slightly cramped aisle, Dominic followed the flight attendant toward the front, weaving between seats, ignoring curious stares. He wondered if the pilot was about to throw more accusations at him, or perhaps the pilot just wanted to reassure him. Doubtful, Dominic thought. Captain Whitaker didn't seem like the comforting type. At the cockpit door, the attendant tapped a code on the keypad. The door unlocked with a soft click. She gestured for Dominic to enter, then pulled it shut behind him. Suddenly, Dominic was in the small cockpit, face to face with Captain Whitaker and his first officer, a younger woman named Rebecca Liu. Whitaker greeted Dominic with a tight-lipped expression. "Take a seat." He motioned to the jump seat just behind the pilot and co-pilot seats. Dominic hesitated, then complied, buckling up. The hum of the plane's engines enveloped him, and the view out the cockpit windows was breathtaking blue skies with scattered clouds. But the tension inside was anything but serene. Without preamble, Whitaker flipped a switch, momentarily focusing on the flight instruments. Then he swiveled, meeting Dominic's eyes. "I've noticed you, from the airport terminal to this flight. There's something you're not telling us. Why are you really on this plane?" Dominic felt the blood rush to his face, a mixture of anxiety and anger. I'm traveling for an internship. Like I told you, sir. I have no idea why you think otherwise." First Officer Liu shot a concerned glance at the captain, as if she wasn't entirely on board with whatever Whitaker was doing. Yet she remained silent, hands hovering near the controls. Whitaker scowled, leaning closer. "I'm responsible for the safety of everyone on this aircraft. I've seen passengers use all sorts of covers, fraudulent documents, suspicious behavior, potential sabotage." The pilot's voice dropped, resonating with the hum of the engines. "I've been watching you. You appear jumpy, always on your phone, looking around. Who are you communicating with?" Dominic's voice wavered with frustration. "I'm not communicating with anyone suspicious. I was texting my mother. She's waiting to hear I got to Chicago safely." Whitaker's gaze was icy, unwavering. "I don't believe you." In that moment, Dominic realized how powerless he was. He was alone, in a cockpit, at 35,000 feet. No chance to walk away. The pilot, in uniform and with authority, was essentially accusing him of being a threat. Dominic's mind raced. Was there some misunderstanding, or was this purely prejudice? Whitaker frowned deeper. "Well, let's see what your mother has to say." He reached out a hand, demanding Dominic's phone. "I want to see your messages." Dominic swallowed hard. Every impulse told him not to hand over personal property, but fear and confusion gripped him. Reluctantly, he unlocked his phone and passed it to Whitaker. The pilot scrolled through recent messages, scanning them. At one point, a flicker of disappointment shadowed his face. Dominic's texts were exactly what he claimed. Updates to his mother, a friend cheering him on, a conversation about the internship details. After an uncomfortably long silence, Whitaker shoved the phone back into Dominic's hands. "You can return to your seat, but I'll be watching you closely. And if anything is out of line, I won't hesitate to make an emergency landing and hand you over to authorities." The raw hostility in Whitaker's tone squeezed Dominic's chest. He unbuckled, trembling with pent-up emotions, anger, fear, disbelief. First Officer Liu's eyes were on the instruments, her jaw tight. She gave Dominic a fleeting, sympathetic look as he rose to leave. Just before Dominic slipped through the door, Whitaker's voice followed. "Don't think for one second you can fool me. If you're up to something, I'll find out." Dominic hurried out, his heart pounding like a drum, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. He had never felt so targeted, so powerless. By the time he returned to his seat, Naomi looked alarmed. "What happened? Are you all right?" He only managed a shaky nod. "I'm fine," he lied. Little did either of them know that was only the beginning. Captain Whitaker was nowhere near finished, and the situation would soon spiral into an explosive confrontation, set in motion by prejudice, pride, and the friction of hidden truths. Dominic clutched the armrest, wishing fervently for an ally in the face of this silent onslaught, an ally who, unbeknownst to him, was about to appear in the most astonishing way possible. Flight 662 landed at Chicago O'Hare later than scheduled. the after effects of turbulent weather forcing a slight detour. Passengers disembarked with varying levels of exhaustion. Dominic hurried off, wanting to put as much distance as possible between himself and Captain Whitaker. He was still shaken by the pilot's accusatory attitude. His plan was simple: retrieve his luggage, meet the driver his mother had arranged to pick him up, and go straight to the apartment they'd rented for his stay in Chicago. He'd already texted his mom about the bizarre events, but she hadn't responded, likely busy with her own schedule. Although deeply unsettled, Dominic clung to the solace that the flight was over. But fate had other plans. As he stepped into the bustling arrivals area, scanning for any sign with his name on it, two uniformed Chicago Police Department officers approached him. "Excuse me," said one, a tall man with a measured tone. "Are you Dominic Spencer?" Dominic's stomach twisted. "Yes, I am. We'd like you to come with us," the other officer stated. "We have some questions." A wave of dread surged through him. Questions about what? Why? His heart hammered as he tried to remain calm. "Sure, but can I ask what this is about?" "Let's take it somewhere quieter," the tall officer replied, glancing at the surrounding throng of travelers. Dominic followed them to a less crowded corner near a row of baggage carousels. The older officer cleared his throat. "We received a call from Captain Ray Whitaker of Skyway Horizons stating that you may be involved in suspicious activity. He alleged you made threatening remarks on the plane." Dominic's jaw dropped in disbelief. "That's not true. I didn't threaten anyone. He's just had it out for me since Denver." The younger officer studied Dominic's face. "Son, we need to see any documents you have: ID, tickets, proof of this alleged internship. We also want to check your belongings." Dominic felt anger flash like lightning inside him, but he complied. He handed over his ID, the internship acceptance letter, and even showed them the text conversations about his internship schedule in Chicago. The officers inspected everything carefully. They asked him a series of questions: where he was staying, what his mother's name was, who was picking him up. Dominic answered truthfully, his voice on the edge of panic but still coherent. Meanwhile, curious onlookers gathered. Dominic spotted Captain Whitaker a short distance away, leaning against a pillar with his arms crossed, glaring defiantly. Next to him stood two additional airport security personnel. It was as if Whitaker had come specifically to see Dominic detained. At length, the older officer's stance softened. "Your documentation checks out. There's no evidence of threats or wrongdoing. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Spencer, but we have to follow up on any call about potential threats, especially at an airport. You're free to go." Relief and pent-up rage roared in Dominic's chest. He thanked the officers, shoulders sagging. He wanted to confront Whitaker, shout at him for lying, but he knew it would only worsen the situation. As the officers dispersed, the pilot strode closer. Dominic braced himself for another confrontation, but this time, something unexpected happened. Out of the corner of his eye, Dominic saw a woman in a tailored navy blue pantsuit, approaching her gait purposeful, her eyes fixed on Whitaker. She was flanked by a man wearing a Skyway Horizons corporate badge that read Director of Operations. Captain Whitaker froze. A flicker of recognition crossed his face as the woman reached them. Her posture was commanding, exuding an aura of authority that made even the pilot stiffen. Dominic, with confusion swirling in his mind, locked eyes with her and did a double take. It was his mother, Danielle Spencer. "Mom?" Dominic stuttered, disbelief coloring his voice. She was supposed to be in Colorado, finishing up some crucial business. They had an arrangement that she'd fly out in a few days to visit him in Chicago once he'd settled. But here she was, looking every bit the formidable executive. The pilot's expression was priceless, pure shock, mixed with apprehension. "Ma'am, he glanced uncertainly at the Director of Operations. Danielle Spencer's gaze swept between Whitaker and Dominic, her features carving into an icy mask. She spoke with measured calm, her voice cutting through the noise of the terminal. "Captain Whitaker, I understand you've made repeated accusations against this passenger. My son." Her emphasis on "my son" was like thunder. "Before we proceed any further, let's clarify a few details, shall we?" Whitaker swallowed hard. Yes, Miss Spencer. It's Miss S. Spencer, she corrected, gently but firmly. Then she turned to the director of operations. Tom, would you please confirm my role in this airline? Tom inclined his head, looking uncomfortable. Certainly, Miss S. Spencer is the current majority stakeholder and acting chairwoman of the board for Skyway Horizons. She's also our largest private investor. In short, she owns this airline. A hush fell. The tension among onlookers thickened. Whitaker's eyes darted back and forth, a slow realization chiseling away his mask of authority. Dominic, still processing, watched Whitaker's face drain of color. Danielle didn't wait for Whitaker's response. I'd like to speak with you privately, she said, then looked at Dominic. Go collect your luggage, honey. We'll talk once I'm done here. Though a swarm of emotions raged inside him, relief, confusion, lingering anger, Dominic obeyed. He headed to the carousel, leaving behind a stunned circle of security personnel and curious bystanders. As he walked away, he heard his mother's voice behind him, cold and commanding. I will not tolerate racial profiling or harassment of any kind in my airline, Captain. Dominic's pulse pounded. A small part of him wanted to eavesdrop, but he also knew better than to interfere. Instead, he allowed the reality to sink in. His mother owned the airline for which Whitaker worked. She had used a proxy identity for many years to keep her stake and direct involvement discreet, wanting to avoid nepotism or undue attention. Dominic had known about her substantial investments, but not the entire extent. Now, the secret was out, at least to Whitaker and the immediate staff. By the time Dominic retrieved his suitcase, he saw his mother walking toward him, her expression unreadable. The director of operations was no longer by her side. Only two airport security staff trailed at a respectful distance. Dominic wondered what had just transpired between her and Whitaker. Hey, sweetheart, Danielle said softly, drawing him into a hug. It was a motherly embrace that held the warmth of concern and the tension of just concluded battle. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. He clung to her, eyes burning with tears he refused to shed. Why? Why are you here? I found out that Captain Whitaker had lodged a formal complaint about you mid-flight, claiming you posed a security threat. That triggered an internal alert at Skyway Horizons. The moment your name popped up, I got on the next flight. I wasn't about to let this continue unchecked. Dominic exhaled a trembling breath. I didn't know you were the majority owner. She smiled thinly. I keep a low profile for personal reasons. But this, well, I'm not letting it slide. Let's find a quieter place to talk. Their conversation was cut short by a sudden commotion near the security desks. Several police officers rushed past, escorted by airport staff. They seemed to be heading in the direction of Captain Whitaker. A pang of worry sparked in Dominic's chest. Had something escalated? The next hour was a blur. Danielle and Dominic were guided to a VIP lounge within the airport. Courtesy of the director of operations, they were offered refreshments, a quiet place to decompress. Yet neither could relax fully. There were too many unanswered questions. Eventually, the director of operations, Tom, joined them. We've placed Captain Whitaker on immediate administrative leave, pending an investigation, he explained, carefully choosing his words. We have zero tolerance for discriminatory conduct. He's also facing potential legal consequences if it turns out he filed a false security claim. Danielle nodded, expression resolute. This isn't just about my son. If he's done this before, or feels emboldened to target other black passengers, or any minority passengers, that ends now. Full accountability. The sternness in her voice reminded Dominic of how she managed her business's ethical, direct, and uncompromising. The swirling mix of events, Whitaker's racist accusations, Danielle's reveal as the airline owner, the pilot's imminent downfall left him feeling both vindicated and emotionally drained. In that moment, Dominic realized just how high the stakes were. This wasn't merely a personal dispute. It was about exposing deeper prejudices in an industry that prided itself on security and neutrality. And the repercussions for Whitaker could be severe. Still, Dominic couldn't shake the memory of the pilot's intense stare, as though he believed he could bully the world into seeing things his way. Dominic doubted Whitaker would accept these consequences without a fight. There was a storm on the horizon, and the next chapter of this saga was just beginning. The next day, Dominic awoke in the Chicago apartment to the buzzing of his phone. He fumbled sleepily and squinted at the screen. Countless missed calls, text messages, and email notifications. The digital flurry was a testament to overnight developments. He scrolled through the messages, heart hammering. 4 missed calls from unknown numbers. Multiple texts from an attorney representing Skyway Horizons, requesting a statement from Dominic. Emails from news outlets, CNN, NBC, Chicago, and smaller blogs asking for interviews about an airport discrimination incident. It was overwhelming. The night before, Danielle had insisted he get some rest after the ordeal, promising to handle the legal and corporate aspects herself. Still, the interest from national media was startling. Dominic recalled seeing viral stories in the past videos of racial profiling incidents in stores or on airlines, sparking widespread outrage. Never did he imagine becoming the subject of one of those stories himself. He threw on a t-shirt and went to the living room, where his mother was already seated on the couch. Laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. Even in casual attire, her composure radiated the confidence of a corporate executive. She motioned for Dominic to take a seat, finishing her call in hushed tones. "All right," she said to the person on the other end. "We'll coordinate. Thank you." With that, she ended the call and offered Dominic a warm but tired smile. "Good morning." "Morning," he said, flopping onto the couch. "My phone's going crazy. News outlets want an interview, and I have a text from an attorney?" Danielle nodded. "Yes, the legal team at Skyway Horizons is preparing for any inquiries, especially since you're a minor. I spoke to them and told them you won't be making any solo statements right now. This has officially become a major PR case for the airline, and it's my duty legally and ethically to address it. So, if reporters contact you, just tell them to direct everything through me or the company's media relations." Dominic swallowed, the reality sinking deeper. "Do you think it'll turn into a lawsuit?" His mother sighed. "Possibly. The problem is that Whitaker filed an official security complaint, which triggered law enforcement involvement. If it's proven baseless, and the airline is convinced it was then, he's liable for false reporting. Also, civil rights attorneys might get involved if they believe racial profiling was the motivator. Honestly, Dominic, it's a mess." He nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety twist in his stomach. What's going to happen to Whitaker? She pursed her lips. He's on administrative leave, and he's barred from piloting any aircraft pending a formal investigation. If the findings confirm misconduct and prejudice, he'll be fired. But you need to know something. He's already threatened to sue the airline for defamation, claiming we're misrepresenting his actions as racist. Dominic clenched his fists. But it was racist. He singled me out for no reason. And then lying about me, making threats. She reached over, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know. And I promise you, justice will be served. We have internal surveillance from the plane, statements from other passengers who witnessed his treatment of you. There's also airport security footage in Denver. The evidence is stacked against him." Dominic felt an immense wave of relief. "Okay, good. I just hate that any of this is happening." Danielle's voice softened. "I do too, sweetheart. But if we don't address it openly, it might continue to happen to others. Let's handle this with integrity." Just then, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and winced. "I have a conference call with the board in 30 minutes. Are you all right to handle breakfast on your own?" Dominic nodded absently, his mind still spinning. "Sure, I'll just order something from DoorDash." His mother rose, smoothing invisible wrinkles on her blouse. She leaned down to kiss his forehead. "We'll get through this," she said gently. Left alone, Dominic stared at his phone. The news alerts didn't stop. A wave of messages from classmates back home in Colorado. Concerned texts from friends. Congratulatory remarks from others saying, "Go get him," as if this were some kind of vigilante mission. Dominic sighed. He was just a teenager who wanted to do his internship and explore Chicago. Yet here he was, thrust into the spotlight of a national controversy. While the coffee maker sputtered and dripped in the kitchen, Dominic tapped open Twitter. The hashtags #airport profiling and #Skyway Horizons incident were trending regionally. A shaky cell phone video from another passenger on Flight 662 had captured Dominic's confrontation with Captain Whitaker near the plane door. In the short clip, Whitaker's aggressive tone was evident, though the audio was muffled. Comments ranged from supportive messages like, "That poor kid," to hateful trolls spewing vitriol. It was dizzying. He forced himself to close the app. The negativity weighed heavily on him. Instead, he texted his best friend back in Colorado, Tyrone, Dominic, "Hey man, crazy day as you've probably seen. I'm doing okay, just overwhelmed. We'll keep you posted." A response arrived in seconds. "Tyrone, yo D, I saw that clip. That pilot is done for. You good though? You want me to come out there?" Dominic smiled faintly at his friend's concern. "Dominic, I'm good. Thanks. Let's talk later." He set his phone down just as the coffee finished brewing. The aroma helped steady his nerves. Sipping the bitter warmth, Dominic allowed himself to hope that the worst was over. Captain Whitaker was suspended, the truth was out, and maybe now Dominic could finally begin his internship in peace. But sometimes, trouble has a way of metastasizing. Beneath the surface, a swirl of events was transpiring. Hidden from Dominic's immediate view, Captain Whitaker wasn't just going to bow out gracefully. His next move would be as daring as it was desperate, and it would threaten to shake the Spencers' world once again. 2 days passed. Dominic started his internship at Tesla's Chicago offices, a sleek building overlooking the Chicago River. The environment was stimulating, developers, engineers, and innovators bustling about. Despite the exhilarating new responsibilities, Dominic's attention was still partially hijacked by the events unfolding in the media. Skyway Horizons released an official statement condemning discrimination and announcing an internal investigation. Captain Whitaker, meanwhile, had gone silent, no comment to the press. Rumors swirled that he was preparing a legal counterstrike. On a Thursday afternoon, as Dominic wrapped up a coding tutorial in the Tesla building's lounge, he received a text from his mother, "Mom, could you meet me at the law firm downtown after work?" Important. A jolt of worry surged through him. They'd had no major developments since the initial confrontation, so this must be something new. He responded affirmatively and quickly headed out at 5 p.m., weaving through Chicago's busy streets. Taxis honked, pedestrians jostled on sidewalks. The city's energy pulsed. He arrived at the towering office building housing Palmer and Reinhold, the prestigious law firm representing Skyway Horizons. Stepping off the elevator onto the 31st floor, Dominic found his mother waiting in a glass-walled conference room, talking to a suited man with slicked-back hair, Carlton Palmer, the senior partner. Danielle greeted Dominic with a warm smile, though worry lines creased her brow. "Hey, honey, this is Mr. Palmer. He's our lead counsel." Carlton Palmer nodded politely. "Dominic, thanks for coming." Dominic shook the man's hand, then slid into a seat at the long conference table. He glanced at the spread of documents and the anxious expression on his mother's face. "What's going on?" Palmer cleared his throat. "I'll be direct. Captain Whitaker filed a lawsuit this morning alleging defamation and wrongful suspension by Skyway Horizons, and also claiming that you, Dominic, are a co-conspirator." Dominic nearly choked on air. "See conspirator?" he repeated, stunned. "What does that even mean?" Palmer glanced at Danielle, who gave a firm nod for him to proceed. The lawyer sighed. "He's accusing you of orchestrating a fake racial profiling incident to entrap him, thereby damaging his career and reputation. He claims the tension between you two was fabricated or exaggerated for monetary gain. He also states that you threatened him and tried to coerce him into handing over hush money. All of this is, of course, nonsense, but we have to take it seriously in a court of law." Dominic's head spun. "This is insane. He's lying. I never asked him for hush money. I didn't want any of this. He's the one who started everything." Danielle reached for Dominic's hand, soothing him. "We know, and we have evidence to counter all of this. But lawsuits can be messy and time-consuming," Palmer continued. "We have flight footage, passenger testimonies, and your documented record as an intern with no prior misconduct. His claims are very weak. But sometimes a desperate defendant tries to intimidate the plaintiff or muddy the waters. That's likely what he's doing, hoping to force a settlement or scare you off." Dominic stared at the table. A swirl of anger and hurt surged in him. "So what happens now?" Palmer folded his hands. will file a motion to dismiss the frivolous claims. Simultaneously, the airline is conducting its internal disciplinary process for Whitaker. When that's complete, I suspect they'll terminate him. But he's lashing out, hoping to tarnish your credibility and create leverage. Tears of frustration prickled Dominic's eyes. He blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. But I'm just a kid, he managed, voice tight. His mother squeezed his hand reassuringly. That's precisely why we're going to protect you. You won't face this alone, Dominic. And you are not just a kid. You're my son. Anyone who targets you like this will have to answer to me and to the law. Palmer gave a small, supportive nod. I'll keep you both updated on court proceedings. In the meantime, we'd like you to prepare a statement of events in your own words, something we can submit as a formal affidavit if needed. Dominic inhaled, trying to steady his emotions. All right, I'll do it. The rest of the meeting was a blur of legalese. They spoke about potential timelines, depositions, and media inquiries. By the time mother and son left the law firm, the sun had dipped behind Chicago's skyscrapers, painting the sky in pinkish hues. They rode in a hired car back to the apartment, silence wrapping around them. Dominic leaned against the window, mind whirling. Lawsuits, affidavits, depositions, it felt surreal. He remembered the moment he first encountered Captain Whitaker in Denver, how strange it had seemed, how it escalated into a nightmare. Now the pilot was doubling down on his attempts to paint Dominic as some kind of villain. Danielle placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. We'll fight this, and we'll win. Trust me. He nodded, wishing he had her unshakable confidence. I do. It's just a lot. I know. Her voice was tender. Try to focus on your internship, on enjoying Chicago. Let the lawyers handle this. He managed a nod. The city lights blurred outside the window, mesmerizing in their twinkle. Little did Dominic know, an even bigger twist was lurking on the horizon, one that would explode in a spectacular clash of truth and falsehood. Captain Whitaker had yet to play his most desperate card, and once he did, the final showdown would unleash every buried secret, every hush-hush scandal, culminating in a karmic reckoning far more dramatic than either side could have predicted. A week later, the tension had reached a boiling point. News outlets frothed with updates, teen accused by pilot fights back, Skyway Horizons under scrutiny, racial profiling in the skies. The pilot's lawsuit remained overshadowed by the airline's internal investigation, though. Public sentiment largely favored Dominic, especially after clips of the initial confrontation went viral. One Thursday afternoon, while Danielle was on a conference call from the Chicago apartment, Dominic decided to walk to a nearby grocery store. He needed to clear his head. The summer sun beat down on the pavement, city bustle swirling around him. He had nearly reached the store when his phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. I have information that could help you. Meet me at the Starbucks on Michigan Avenue, 6 p.m. today. Come alone. Dominic's heart skipped a beat. Was this a prank? Could it be a trap? He showed his mother, who immediately insisted they inform the lawyers. However, Palmer suggested it could be an ex-employee or someone who had dirt on Whitaker. Ultimately, they decided to carefully check it out, but Dominic would not go alone. That evening, mother and son entered the Starbucks on Michigan Avenue, scanning the patrons. Danielle had discreetly arranged for 2 private security personnel plainclothes at nearby tables. They waited by the counter until a hooded figure sitting in the corner raised his hand in a slight wave. Approaching cautiously, they noticed the man was in his late 40s, with thinning hair and a nervous twitch. He wore a black hoodie, and the lines on his face spoke of stress or guilt. When Dominic and Danielle arrived at the table, he introduced himself as Lawrence Colton, a former aircraft mechanic at Skyway Horizons. They sat down, ordered drinks, then leaned in to hear what Colton had to say. Look, I don't want to get dragged into some big scandal, but I can't stand by and watch Whitaker ruin another life. He rubbed his forehead as though trying to suppress a headache. He has a history, you know, of targeting certain passengers. Danielle's eyes narrowed. You mean this isn't his first time profiling someone based on race? Colton shook his head. No. There was an incident 6 months ago. A Hispanic man was escorted off one of Whitaker's flights. The pilot claimed the passenger threatened a flight attendant. The passenger insisted it was a misunderstanding. The airline quietly settled, I believe. Everything got hushed up, but I overheard bits while working in the hangar. Dominic's stomach churned. Why is it coming out now? Colton glanced around nervously, lowering his voice further. I was fired 2 months ago for whistleblowing unrelated safety issues, but I still have access to some internal records, including logs and emails that might show a pattern of Whitaker's behavior. If you have those logs, you could prove he has a history of lying about passengers. That would destroy his lawsuit against you. Danielle and Dominic exchanged a tense look. If this was true, it might be the bombshell they needed. But they had to be certain it wasn't a trap. Why come to us? Danielle asked. You could sell this to the media. Colton's gaze flicked from mother to son. Look, I just want to do the right thing and maybe get some severance from the airline. My job prospects in aviation are shot. I'm counting on you, as the owner, to do right by me if I help you. I can't trust going through corporate channels. They're the ones who fired me. Danielle pressed her lips together. If the evidence is legitimate, the airline would see you reinstated or fairly compensated. But it must be genuine, and it must be obtained legally. Colton nodded frantically. It's legit. I have copies on a flash drive. Secure backups too, in case something happens to me. Dominic's heart thudded. This was big. It could prove that Whitaker systematically targeted minority passengers, that his actions weren't isolated. The mother and son concluded the meeting with caution, promising to review the evidence and consult their lawyers. Danielle instructed Colton to hand the materials directly to Palmer and Reinhold, ensuring everything was done above board. They left Starbucks in a whirlwind of emotion. Dominic's mind raced. If they corroborated Colton's documents, it could be the final nail in Whitaker's coffin. No more playing victim, no more dragging Dominic's name through the mud. The next day, Colton delivered the flash drive to the law firm. Preliminary inspection revealed internal flight logs, a few email threads, and 2 official complaints filed against Whitaker by flight attendants who'd noticed him harassing certain passengers. The data was damning. Palmer called an emergency meeting at the firm. This evidence changes everything, he explained, wearing a grave expression. I'll forward these documents to Skyway Horizon's HR department. The civil rights lawyers already investigating your case, Dominic, will have a field day with this. Whitaker's track record of false accusations is more extensive than we knew. Danielle exhaled a shaky sigh of relief. Thank God. We can finally expose him. But the drama was far from over. Whitaker still had the pilots' union supporting him in some capacity, plus a cadre of attorneys. The final confrontation would be in the courtroom, or in a hearing room at least. Karmic retribution loomed, and it would unfold in a more public forum than either Dominic or Danielle initially anticipated. A month later, an official hearing was convened by the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and the corporate board of Skyway Horizons to determine Captain Whitaker's fate. Typically, such matters happen behind closed doors, but the intense media attention made it a semi-public event. Journalists, legal teams, and selected members of the public were allowed in. The hearing took place in a large wood-paneled room in downtown Chicago. At the front sat a panel of FAA representatives and Skyway Horizons board members. On one side, Whitaker and his lawyers. On the other, Danielle, Dominic, and the airline's counsel. Dominic's heart thumped as he entered, seeing the rows of seats, the cameras from local news stations, the cluster of reporters. This was bigger than he imagined. His mother squeezed his hand reassuringly. Even though the tension weighed heavily, Dominic noticed the unwavering determination in her eyes. She was here not just for him, but for every passenger Whitaker had wronged. The hearing began with a formal reading of allegations against Whitaker, repeated misuse of security protocol, racially charged profiling, potential endangerment of passenger safety, and lying to authorities. Whitaker stood, stoic, as each charge was listed. He only displayed a flicker of emotion when it came time to address the final item, his lawsuit claiming defamation. The panel announced it would consider the new evidence from Lawrence Colton to ascertain the veracity of Whitaker's claims. Dominic took the stand first, flanked by the airline's attorney and his mother. With a trembling voice, he recounted the events from Denver International Airport, Whitaker's suspicious questioning, the false accusations, being called to the cockpit, the post-flight confrontation in Chicago, and the pilot's blatant lies that Dominic had threatened him. As he spoke, a hush fell. Many in the room clearly saw the raw anxiety he still felt. Next, Naomi Parks, the passenger from Premium Economy, testified about the flight. She described how rattled Dominic was after returning from the cockpit, how she overheard Whitaker's hostile tone. Then came a couple of flight attendants who had witnessed part of the mid-flight interrogation. Their testimony corroborated Dominic's story. Finally, the footage from airport security and a snippet from the plane's onboard cameras was played showing Whitaker confronting Dominic, pointing a finger in his face. Dominic shuddered, reliving that moment. Whitaker's lawyers tried to poke holes, suggesting Dominic was acting suspiciously and that the pilot had reasonable cause to investigate. But the panel seemed unconvinced, especially in light of the newly revealed pattern of targeting minority passengers. The real bombshell dropped when Lawrence Colton took the stand. He presented the internal records detailing how, on at least 3 prior occasions, Whitaker had called for security checks on minority passengers without sufficient cause. The hush in the room became electric, every ear tuned to his every word. Emails surfaced in which Whitaker ranted to a colleague about certain people who shouldn't be allowed to fly. Gasps rippled across the audience. Whitaker's face reddened, and he began whispering furiously to his lawyers. They tried to dismiss Colton's evidence as stolen, unauthorized, and out of context. But the panel rebuffed them. This was an airline's internal data, relevant to an ongoing investigation of discriminatory practices. Finally, Captain Whitaker himself took the stand. His posture was rigid, jaw clenched. I have served this country as a Marine and as a pilot for over 20 years. I have a spotless record. I was doing my job, protecting our skies. I never acted out of racism, only caution. But the emails betrayed him. So did the testimonies. When pressed by the board about the contradictory nature of his claims versus the evidence, Whitaker faltered. He insisted that Dominic had threatened him, but offered no proof. He alleged the teen demanded money, but had no recordings or messages. His voice rose in desperation. He must have deleted them from his phone. He faked his innocence. One of the FAA representatives leaned forward, hands folded. Captain Whitaker, the burden of proof lies with you. So far, everything indicates you targeted a minor without justification, lied to authorities, and then tried to cover it up. This is a serious misconduct that jeopardizes your license. Whitaker's eyes locked onto Dominic. Hatred flared there, raw, unfiltered. He spat words. This is a setup, a game to ruin my career. And he pointed at Danielle, she orchestrated it all because she hates me, because she wants to make an example of me. Danielle stood calmly. Captain, you brought this upon yourself by lying and harassing my son. I invested in Skyway Horizons to provide safe travel experiences for everyone. Your actions violate everything we stand for. The hearing concluded with deliberations behind closed doors. Tension was so thick Dominic felt he could hardly breathe. The break lasted nearly 2 hours, during which the two sides waited in separate rooms. Danielle tried to comfort Dominic with quiet reassurances, though he could see the strain in her eyes. When they were finally called back in, the lead FAA official delivered the verdict. The short version, Captain Whitaker's pilot license was officially revoked, pending final review. Skyway Horizons was terminating his employment, effective immediately. The pilot was also referred to the Department of Transportation for additional investigations into civil rights violations. As for the defamation lawsuit he'd filed, it was now under scrutiny for being frivolous. Potential perjury charges loomed over Whitaker for lying under oath. A quiet hush settled. Then murmurs and gasps filled the room. Dominic exhaled, tears welling as relief flooded him. The pilot's expression was one of utter defeat, overshadowed by seething resentment. Cameras flashed. Reporters jostled to get quotes. In a final, dramatic outburst, Whitaker lunged forward, shouting, "You ruined me, both of you." Security intervened, restraining him. Dominic flinched, but Danielle stood her ground, steel in her gaze. This was the end of Captain Whitaker's reign of prejudice and intimidation. With the hearing concluded, the legal storm dissipated rapidly. Whitaker's defamation lawsuit collapsed. Dominic was free from the clouds of suspicion that had threatened to overshadow his internship. The media picked up the story headlines, hailed him as the teen who fought back against racial profiling. Many praised Danielle Spencer for her swift action and moral leadership as the airline's owner. Skyway Horizons launched new initiatives, including mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees. Danielle personally oversaw the program, determined to transform the airline's culture from the top down. She quietly reinstated Lawrence Colton into a mechanic's role, giving him a second chance and praising his courage for coming forward. As for Dominic, life slowly returned to normal. He poured himself into his Tesla internship, learning advanced coding and networking with brilliant minds. Yet he'd changed. No longer was he just a wide-eyed teen. He'd faced an intense legal battle, confronting both racism and adult-level stress. He emerged with a deeper sense of empathy, a sharpened resolve. His final week in Chicago, Dominic and his mother strolled along the Navy Pier, gazing at the sparkling waters of Lake Michigan. Ferris wheel lights glowed in the twilight. The city's skyscrapers loomed against a lavender sky. "I'm proud of you," Danielle said, resting an arm around his shoulders. "You handled everything with courage." Dominic nodded. "I had no choice, and I had you behind me." He paused, then admitted, "I feel bad for Whitaker, in a way. If he'd just apologized, maybe none of this would have happened." She squeezed him gently. He made his choices. Hate never leads anywhere good. They rode the Ferris wheel, the city lights rolling out in all directions. Dominic reflected on how far they'd come from that anxiety-ridden moment at Denver International to this peaceful vantage over Chicago. He recognized a thread of gratitude weaving through his experiences. He had been tested, and he'd grown stronger. The next day, on his flight back to Colorado this time, with a different pilot, of course Dominic felt a wave of relief wash over him. As the plane soared into the sky, he realized airports no longer felt intimidating. Instead, they symbolized transformation, the departure from innocence, the arrival at hard-earned wisdom, and the countless journeys in between. And so, while Captain Whitaker faced the consequences of his actions, Dominic returned to his life with new purpose and clarity, forever changed by the drama that had unfolded. Karma had done its work, unveiling biases that needed dismantling, sparing no one from accountability. The turbulence was behind him, and a sky of endless possibility lay ahead. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of courage, justice, and transformation. From the moment the pilot crossed paths with Dominic, tensions soared sky high and destiny took the controls. Together, they confronted prejudice, uncovered hidden truths, and set the record straight in the most dramatic and unforgettable way possible. In the end, real change began with holding the responsible parties accountable and standing firm in the face of injustice. We hope this story inspired you to believe in the power of perseverance, unity, and karma's unwavering hand. If it moved you, please give it a thumbs up, share with friends and family who love a gripping tale, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that delve into life's most challenging dilemmas. Your support fuels our passion for bringing real, thought-provoking narratives to light.